cousin of my wife, who was married in the mid-70s, who we saw over the weekend. We finally ran away on a day off, and I went to Vegas and got married.
He sold over 130 million albums. He made teenage girls scream from New Jersey to New Zealand. The golden-haired god of rock and roll, and somehow, impossibly, he was also a married man. But behind the velvet rope, something was quietly unraveling inside his own home. Decades later, John finally spoke aloud, confirming what many suspected but never proved. A confession so brazen it stopped people mid-scroll. 4 shocking words no one expected to hear. Strap in, because this story is a lot. It changed perceptions, rattled fans, and raised questions about love, fame, and truth itself. The love story that shocked everyone. Before we get to the bombshell, let's rewind the tape, because you cannot fully appreciate just how jaw-dropping Jon Bon Jovi's confession is without understanding the fairy tale that supposedly surrounded it. It was 1980. Jon Bon Jovi was a scraggly, ambitious teenager at Sayreville War Memorial High School in New Jersey. Not yet the stadium-filling rock god the world would come to know. He first met Dorothea Hurley while they were both students there, and their meeting was about as unglamorous as it gets. He tried to cheat off her paper during a history exam. Not exactly the opening scene of a romantic movie, is it? But John himself described it differently. He told People in 2020, "I was immediately drawn to her from the minute I saw her, and that never changed." And Dorothea? She had a characteristically dry wit about the whole thing. "I always said I was good at spotting potential too. I have a gift." There was only one small problem. At the time, Dorothea was actually dating John's best friend, Bobby. So the two were just friends for a couple of years, circling each other, waiting. Then John's career started catching fire, and by the time fame knocked on his door, Dorothea was right there beside him. But love stories in the rock and roll world are never simple. In 1985, the couple split, and during that time, John briefly dated actress Diane Lane for about 5 months. It wasn't meant to be with Lane, though. John and Dorothea found their way back to each other, and this time, they weren't letting go. Think about what that means for a second. Jon Bon Jovi, the man who was about to become one of the most desired human beings on the entire planet, had every exit ramp available to him. He could have disappeared into the arms of Hollywood. He could have let fame rewrite his entire identity. Instead, he kept coming back to the girl from the history class. Make of that what you will. And then came the moment that shocked literally everyone who knew them. In April of 1989, when John was 27 and Dorothea was 26, the two eloped to Las Vegas without telling a single soul. The timing could not have been more dramatic. We had the #1 album, the #1 single, and we were playing 3 nights at the Forum in LA, John recalled to Men's Health. I turned to Dorothea and said, "I got an idea. Why don't we go right now?" She said, "You're out of your mind." He pushed. She agreed. They ran off to a Vegas wedding chapel and tied the knot without telling a single person. Not the band, not management, not their parents, nobody. John told People that the initial reaction to the news was overwhelmingly negative. "It shocked a lot of people, shocked about everybody," he said. "The band, management, agents, lawyers, parents, you name it." His management, in particular, was reportedly furious. His team wanted him to remain single on paper to keep the interest of the millions of fans who had the hots for him. The heartthrob had to stay available, at least in the public imagination. A wife was bad for business, but John didn't care. After feeling hurt by everyone trying to take away from a beautiful moment, he eventually changed his perspective, saying, "I stood up and went, wait a minute, why are we living our life for anyone else? And 35 years later, we're still married. Adorable, right?" Hold that thought. The confession that broke the internet. Fast forward to April 2024. Jon Bon Jovi is 62 years old. He has a brand new Hulu documentary, Thank You, Good Night, the Bon Jovi story, dropping for the whole world to see. He's doing press, doing interviews, the whole promotional circuit. And then he sits down with Michael Strahan for an ABC News special called Halfway There, and everything comes pouring out. Speaking candidly about his marriage, John got very real about his infidelity during the early years of his relationship with Dorothea. "I'm a rock and roll star. I'm not a saint," he told Strahan. "I'm John Bon Jovi. It was pretty good." And then he said 4 words that stopped people mid-scroll across the internet. "I got away with the crime." "I got away with crime," the Grammy winner told Strahan. "I'm a rock and roll star. I'm not a saint. You know, I'm not saying that there weren't 100 girls in my life. I'm John Bon Jovi. It was pretty good. 100 girls." He said that, out loud, on television, with his name attached. Now, let's be very clear about what John was and was not saying here. He wasn't confessing to a single secret affair with one specific person. He was essentially acknowledging what many had long suspected, that life on the road, at the absolute peak of rock and roll excess, was not exactly a monk's existence. And he was saying it with an almost breezy self-awareness that made it simultaneously refreshing and absolutely maddening, depending on which side of the equation you're sitting on. Because here's the thing, fans are divided on this one, and it's not hard to understand why. On one hand, there is something almost disarming about a man of John's stature refusing to perform the usual rockstar revisionism. He didn't pretend he was faithful. He didn't claim he was too busy touring to notice anyone else existed. He looked the camera in the eye and said, "Yeah, I was that guy." And on the other hand, Dorothea, the woman at home, the woman raising their children, the woman who apparently knew and stayed anyway. That's a more complicated story, and we're going to get to it. But here's where it gets more nuanced, because John didn't just drop the bombshell and walk away. He immediately followed up with what reads like a very carefully prepared justification. "But if you think I was ever going to jeopardize anything for believing the narcissist in me was real, what a stupid thing to do," he told Strahan. "What kind of excesses does a man need that's going to fuel that fire?" In other words, yes, there were 100 women, but I never let it blow up my actual life. I knew where the line was. And it wasn't just the Strahan interview. Around the same time, John told The Independent, "These are all the wonderful cliches of rock stardom. It's about never lying about having been a saint, but not being a fool enough to mess up the home life either." Translation: I played by the unspoken rock star rulebook. I strayed, but I didn't burn the house down. And now I'm telling you about it because transparency is, apparently, the secret to a long marriage. The internet, unsurprisingly, had a lot of feelings about all of this. And when we say a lot of feelings, we're talking full-on generational whiplash. Because older fans, a lot of them were not shocked. They were like, "And water is wet." To them, this was just confirmation of what the rock and roll era always looked like behind the scenes. Groupies, tour buses, blurred lines, the whole cliché that somehow never felt like a cliché when it was happening in real time. But younger audiences? Whole different reaction. Because they grew up in an era where celebrity relationships are dissected in real time. Where loyalty is part of the brand. Where people expect public figures to at least pretend to align with modern ideas of commitment. So hearing a legacy artist casually say, "Yeah, there were 100 women," didn't feel nostalgic. It felt jarring, and that's where the real tension comes in. Because John isn't apologizing. He's not reframing it as a mistake. He's not even really expressing regret in the way people have come to expect from public confessions. He's explaining it, contextualizing it, almost normalizing it, and depending on who you are, that either feels refreshingly honest or wildly uncomfortable. Because it forces a question a lot of people don't actually want to answer. If the marriage survived this, then what exactly was it built on in the first place? The woman behind the rock star. Let's talk about Dorothea Hurley, because in all the chaos of John's confession, she is the one who deserves the most column inches, and she rarely gets them. Dorothea has always prided herself on staying grounded. "That's his life, not ours," she once said of John's celebrity. While her husband was filling stadiums and splashing across magazine covers as one of the decade's most lusted-after figures, Dorothea was at home in New Jersey, quietly building a life that had nothing to do with rock and roll mythology. John has always expressed gratitude toward his wife, especially for understanding that the life of a rock and roll star isn't easy. "I've been in one of the biggest rock bands in the world for 25 years, and I'm not a saint. And I have not been a saint. And Christ, I missed tons of birthdays and school plays," he told Men's Health in 2010. Missed birthdays. Missed school plays. And apparently, 100 girls on the road. And still, Dorothea stayed. Why? How? Well, the couple themselves have offered their own explanation. "Mutual respect," John told people. "Having grown up together and grown together, and we really like each other, we want to hang out." Dorothea put it slightly differently, saying, "We work hard at it, but we enjoy each other, and we never fell for the trappings of what celebrity can do. We've witnessed that happen over the years to people that were close to us, and people that we knew from afar. They watched other famous couples explode. They watched rock and roll marriages detonate spectacularly in public. And they chose, deliberately and consciously, not to be that story. Now, and this is the part that is genuinely hard to parse, Dorothea did not appear to be blindsided by John's confession. There was no tearful press statement, no subtle subtweet, no conspicuous absence from his side at public events. She knew the score. She had known it seems, for a very long time. And she had chosen, actively, repeatedly, to stay. Is that strength? Is that love? Or is it something more complicated than either of those words can hold? Everyone who has heard John's confession has had to sit with that question for themselves. Does that make Dorothea a saint? Some would say so. Others might find it more complicated than that. But what's undeniable is that John has been unequivocal about her importance in his life. "There is no doubt in my mind that this world revolves because of her," he told Strahan. "Because of what she did to keep the kids right, what she does to keep me right, what we do together to keep it right. No doubt about it." And then there's this, which might be the most quietly devastating thing John has ever said. "She's also there when I fall, and I'm there for her when she falls. No matter where I went in my career, the ups or the downs, we went there together." That's not the language of a man who takes his wife for granted. That's the language of a man who knows with absolute certainty that he would be lost without her. Us night. Everything nearly fell apart. There is a moment in every family's story, even the most famous families, when the carefully constructed public image cracks wide open and what's left behind is just raw, terrified humanity. For John and Dorothea Bon Jovi, that moment came on November 14, 2012. On that night, their eldest daughter, Stephanie Rose Bon Jovi, was found unresponsive in her dorm at Hamilton College in upstate New York. Then, just 19 years old, she was rushed to a local hospital for a suspected overdose. This wasn't a tabloid rumor or a PR crisis or a bad review. This was their child, their firstborn. The girl John had walked out of every arena in the world to get back to. And suddenly, the fame and the money and the platinum records meant absolutely nothing, because none of it could protect her from this. John later described receiving news of Stephanie's condition as the worst phone call ever. Speaking to Katie Couric in early 2013, he could barely hold it together. "She's doing great. I appreciate everybody's thoughts and prayers throughout it," he said, stopping when his voice cracked as he held back tears. John admitted that he and Dorothea had been completely blindsided. I'm shocked as much as the next parent with this situation and had no idea," he told the Associated Press in December 2012. They hadn't seen it coming. Their daughter hadn't shown what they recognized as warning signs, and then suddenly, she was fighting for her life in a hospital bed in upstate New York. Upon waking up, Stephanie called her father and came clean about what had happened. "It was my worst moment as a father," John told Metro. "The first thing she said was, 'I'm all right.' But then she said, 'This is what happened. You wake up, you shake it off, and put your shoes on, and say, okay, I am on the way home.' He came home because that's what fathers do." Stephanie recovered. Charges against her were eventually dropped under New York law, which protects people who experience overdoses from criminal prosecution. John later attended a ceremony in New Jersey when Governor Chris Christie signed a similar protective bill into law, saying, "I hope that Governor Christie's actions here will cause other states to stand up and to pay attention." Years later, John and Dorothea tried to put the painful chapter in context. "It happens to a lot of families that you would never know. We dealt with it as a family," Dorothea said. And John, ever the protector, insisted it wasn't a life sentence for their daughter. "You surround them with best help and love and move on. And that's where we're at with it." And they did exactly that. They moved on, together. By 2024, Stephanie Rose had carved out a life of her own, working behind the camera in the entertainment industry. She made a rare public appearance with her parents at the MusiCares Person of the Year Gala in February 2024, the event that honored her father. She got engaged. She began planning a new chapter. The Bon Jovi family had, once again, survived, but the decade following Stephanie's overdose would not be smooth sailing for the family, or for John's career either. The rock star loses his voice. For over 4 decades, John Bon Jovi's voice was his superpower. It was the instrument that filled arenas from Tokyo to Toronto. It was the thing that made Livin' on a Prayer an anthem, that gave Wanted Dead or Alive its ache, that turned every stadium into a church for people who needed to believe that someone had lived through exactly what they were feeling. And then, quietly, it started to go. "I was overusing it," John admitted. "Even though I'm trained and I have studied the craft for these 40 years, eventually the body gives out. It's not dissimilar to being an athlete. Just imagine losing the very thing that made you who you are. Athletes talk about it. The moment the body stops doing what the mind is telling it to do. But for a singer, for a performer who has built an entire identity on the sound of his own voice, it is a particular kind of loss. It is intimate in a way that a pulled hamstring simply cannot be. John Bon Jovi, without that voice, is a proposition that would have been unthinkable for most of his adult life. He tried everything, every kind of therapy, every specialist, but when none of them proved effective enough, in the summer of 2022, he did what he had hoped to avoid. He underwent vocal surgery. The surgery was chronicled in the Hulu docuseries Thank You, Good Night, The Bon Jovi Story, which became the backdrop against which John's confessions about marriage and life played out publicly in 2024. Recovery was slow and humbling. "The process has been slower than I'd hoped for, but the progress and the process are really doing very well," he said carefully. For a man accustomed to performing 2.5 hours a night, 4 nights a week, learning to be patient with his own healing was its own kind of test. It was Dorothea who once again served as the bedrock during this terrifying professional crisis. "My wife has been phenomenal. Without her, I am not sure how I would have coped," John said. He had said nearly the same thing years earlier, when guitarist Richie Sambora's shocking mid-tour departure in 2013 had sent the band into turmoil. Then, too, it was Dorothea who steadied him. This is the recurring motif of their entire marriage, and perhaps the most honest thing John Bon Jovi has ever admitted. Behind every stadium anthem, every platinum record, every sold-out world tour, there was a woman in New Jersey holding everything together, and he almost forgot to protect what she meant to him. the secret to their survival. In April 2025, 1 year after his earth-shaking confession, Jon Bon Jovi took to Instagram to commemorate his and Dorothea's 36th wedding anniversary, posting a photo of 36 red roses with the caption, "36 roses for 36 amazing years. Happy anniversary, my love." He also shared a throwback photo from their wedding day and a picture of the Graceland Wedding Chapel sign that read, "Rockstar Jon Bon Jovi was married here." It was romantic. It was sweet. And it came 12 months after he had openly admitted to decades of infidelity on national television. The contrast is a lot to sit with, because by this point in the story, the fairy tale version of this marriage has been completely dismantled. What's left is something far more interesting and far less easy to define. This isn't the story of a perfect husband who never strayed. It's not even the story of a woman who didn't know. It's the story of two people who, for reasons that only fully make sense to them, decided that what they had was worth holding on to, even when it didn't look the way most people think it should. And that's where this gets uncomfortable, because it challenges the idea that there is only one correct way for a marriage to function. It pokes at that neat little box people like to put relationships in. Loyalty equals love. Betrayal equals the end. But real life, especially at that level of fame and pressure, rarely follows rules that clean. And whether you agree with it or not, whether you admire it or side-eye it, there is one thing you cannot say about Jon and Dorothea Bon Jovi. They were pretending. If anything, what Jon did in 2024 was strip away the last layer of illusion and say, this is what it actually was. And somehow, it's still standing. But perhaps that is exactly the point. Because if there's one thing that Jon and Dorothea Bon Jovi seem to have figured out, messily, imperfectly, over the span of more than 4 decades, it's that a real marriage is not a highlight reel. It is not the elopement in Vegas, or the red roses on the anniversary, or the beautiful family photos. It is everything in between. The missed birthdays, the road tours, the 100 girls he refuses to fully name, the worst phone call of his life at 2 a.m. from a hospital in upstate New York, the surgery that threatened to erase the voice that had built everything they had. Marriage, at that level, across that many years, is not a love story. It's a survival story. And that reframe matters, because too often we watch famous couples and expect the fairy tale to sustain itself on its own terms. We expect that the elopement in Vegas is supposed to be the whole story. We forget that the couple who ran away from everyone they knew in 1989 still had to wake up next to each other in 1999, in 2009, in 2019, through career collapses and family crises and the slow indignities of just being human. The fact that they're still standing isn't magic. It's work. Jon has been remarkably candid about what he believes the actual formula is. He told The Independent, "It's about never lying about having been a saint, but not being a fool enough to mess up the home life either." That's not exactly a Hallmark card sentiment, but it is perhaps more honest than most people dare to be about the compromises that sustain long marriages. He also told people that the foundation of everything is mutual respect, having grown up together and grown together. And we really like each other. We want to hang out. They grew up in the same hometown. They went to the same high school. They share the same peripheral group of old friends. Before Jon Bon Jovi was a brand, he was just a kid from Sayreville, New Jersey, in love with a girl from his history class. And maybe that is what's kept it together. Not perfection, not fidelity, not some rock star myth of romance. Just two people from the same block who decided, over and over again, to keep choosing each other. Jon put it plainly. I stood up and went, wait a minute, why are we living our life for anyone else? And 35 years later, we're still married. The family they built, and where they are now. While the marriage confession dominated headlines, the broader Bon Jovi family story has continued to unfold in genuinely beautiful ways, revealing something deeper about who John and Dorothea are as parents. Beyond the spotlight and speculation, they have built a family grounded in loyalty, resilience, and quiet strength. Their children have grown up largely away from chaos, shaped by values that prioritize humility over fame. Despite the pressures of celebrity life, John and Dorothea remained steady, choosing commitment not just to each other, but to their family. In the end, their story is not just about controversy, but about enduring love and thoughtful parenting. Since their Las Vegas elopement, the couple has had 4 children together: Stephanie, Jesse, Jacob, and Romeo, born between 1993 and 2004. 4 kids raised in the shadow of one of the biggest names in rock and roll, and by all accounts, raised well. Raised to be normal, to the degree that is even possible when your dad's face is on the wall of every hard rock cafe in the world. And if you thought the Bon Jovi family couldn't get more famous, well, enter Millie Bobby Brown. John's son Jake became publicly linked to the Stranger Things actress, and the pair became engaged. Jake and Millie tied the knot in May 2024, in what John described to the BBC as a very small family wedding, and the bride looked gorgeous. John was characteristically gracious about his new daughter-in-law, telling E she's really wonderful, and her and Jake are a great couple. And as for Stephanie, the daughter who nearly broke his heart wide open in 2012, she got engaged in 2024, marking a chapter of new beginnings. John reflected on the news on Sunday Sit-Down with Willie Geist, saying with a mix of pride and humor, "I'm not gonna be #1 anymore." He was so moved by the milestone that he wrote a song specifically for her wedding day titled "Kiss the Bride." Speaking about writing the song, John said, "I cried when we wrote it. I cried when I sang it in the studio. I have yet to play it for my daughter." Even in interview, he couldn't quite get through talking about it without emotion threatening to surface. There is something almost unbearably human about that image. John Bon Jovi, the man who has performed in front of millions without flinching, undone by a song he wrote for his little girl. That is a man who has lived a full, complicated, gloriously imperfect life. And somewhere in the middle of all that beautiful chaos, his wife never left. So, is John Bon Jovi's marriage the love story it's always been presented as? The answer is yes, and no, and also, somehow, more. It's the story of a man who had every opportunity, every temptation, every excuse the music industry could offer, and who used all of it, and still found his way home to the same woman from his history class in New Jersey. It's the story of a woman who chose, with eyes wide open, to stand beside a rock star who admitted he wasn't a saint, and who built something sturdy and real in the gap between his mythology and his humanity. John Bon Jovi's confession stunned people because we weren't supposed to know. The golden couple wasn't meant to have cracks, but here's the thing, the cracks are the whole story. Without them, there's no weight to what they have. No proof that it was ever real. No matter where I went in my career, the ups or the downs, we went there together, John said, and maybe that's the confession that should have surprised us most. Not the 100 girls, but the one woman who outlasted all of them. If you're new here, hit subscribe and the notification bell, because we've got a lot more stories like this one waiting for you. Drop in the comments below. Did John's confession change how you see their marriage? Let us know. And we'll see you in the next one.